Thank you very much. This is an interesting scenario, as everybody could experience. Last year I was at this program in Boston, and it's much better to see people in person and to see their reaction when giving a presentation. So what I want to do today in a very short period of time is to go over getting your product to market and understanding some of the key words and dealing with that. Now, I started a very long time ago with the FDA out of college. I moved up from a GS5 investigator to a GS13 supervisor, gave my resignation, walked out, and started consulting at that time. And that was just when the medical device regulations went into effect. Over the years, we've seen some tremendous changes, but what's interesting, the more things change, the more things seem to stay the same. That's especially when dealing with the FDA. Next slide. Okay, so the hot words in 2020, and I'll probably ask this of everybody who is listening, is called the breakthrough technologies. Everybody, all new technologies, all new startups, everybody thinks they have breakthrough technologies. They believe that breakthrough technologies is going to help them in dealing with the FDA. It probably is going to help them in dealing with their investors and raising capital. The next key words are AI. The next one is AI, and the next one is AI. It's something like real estate, location, location, location. AI is the hot buzzword in dealing with new medical technologies. Whether they're breakthrough or not, we will have to determine, and we'll give you a definition of what is a breakthrough technology. Okay, what is the definition of a medical device? And then everybody, I guess, in this audience is just trying to determine if they have a medical device or how it's defined. This is the definition taken out of the regulations. A device is anything that can be used to diagnose a disease and to cure, monitor, treat, or affect the structure of human or animal and functions without chemical action or being metabolized by the body. So these are very key words. These also, you can see, it includes in vitro diagnostics. And as you can see, it also affects animals. Now, if you have devices that are going to be used for animals, the FDA more or less lets companies start using devices that could be used for human and animals and start selling it or marketing it for animal use without getting FDA approval. So this is something that you might want to look into when you are marketing or coming up with a new medical device to get it out to market faster. Remember, understanding their language is critical for success. Now, normally I give a nice little antidote of a little example of lack of knowledge or understanding knowledge, but it's much more visual than it is oral, so I'll have to bypass that. So we want to make sure that we understand what the indications for use of our device is going to be. That's the number one thing, is how you are going to market it. What is the device going to be used for? That is critical in determining getting this product through to the FDA. When we work with a lot of startups, and right now we're working with quite a few startups in the Boston area, as well as in California and in Raleigh, North Carolina. And we're finding is that we have to try to get the inventors to focus on how the product is going to be used and how they plan to market it. That is critical in any device development and design. Then we got to figure out what the classification of the device is. Is it going to be a class 1? A class 1, probably not. A class 2? Is it going to have to fall in under the de novo? Or is it going to have to go the PMA route? So these are the areas that we have to determine as part of our design and our design development. Each one of those areas takes different amount of time. Now we're working with many devices now that I use software. It's interesting, when I started out in the FDA back in '72, I don't think software was even in the lexicon or the definitions. It definitely wasn't in any of the devices that the FDA and the medical community came up with. Software probably started, I started to see software in some medical devices probably in the late 80s and early 90s. And then the FDA had a hard time determining how they were going to regulate software. That became very difficult for them to figure that out. Was software a device? Was it a component of a device? If it was going to be a component of a device, how is the FDA going to assure that companies were able to qualify that component? Created a very interesting scenario, and it was a lot of learning on the FDA's part, and then it was a lot of learning on the industry's part on how to be able to validate that software or to qualify that software in their device. Now, software as a medical device, as technology continues to advance all facets of healthcare, software has become an important part of all products, integrated widely into digital platforms that serve both medical and non-medical purposes. Software, which is on its own as a medical device, software as a medical device is one of three types of software related to medical devices. The software, in many cases, especially in AI, is the medical device. Now, AI, or artificial intelligence, this is the next generation of medical technology. As we just saw in the last presentation, and I love that background, everybody's trying to make sure that not only is the patient taking their drugs and applying it properly and make it easier to apply. You notice that she said that her device also has software that could be downloaded, and this way it would keep track of whether the patient was taking the medicine in the recommended time. That software is part of that medical device, and that software would be part and have to be validated as part of their device on their FDA clearance. So artificial intelligence is here, and it's here to stay, and it's going to be a critical part in the medical device and the FDA approval process. We have seen many devices in FDA, February 2nd, 2020, FDA authorized marking of the first cardiac ultrasound software that uses AI to guide the user. Now, these are some new products that have been coming out, and some of them we have been working with over the years. The next one, in the Wall Street Journal in January 24th of 2020, it's a company called Pearl was excited to share that they were featured in the Wall Street Journal. It's a piece about how their AI capabilities are being applied to the dental insurance space, specifically as it relates to rooting out fraud at large scale, as to how the dentists were billing and seeing if the actual cases that the dentist was billing for was actually there or not. So there's many different uses for AI as a medical device. Okay, so we're also working with, through this list of what is a breakthrough technology. Now, MDI is especially working with several breakthrough technologies using AI. Reviewing the dental slides for carie, as I just explained, doing a real-time colonoscopy for cancer detection, reviewing CAT scans for brain tumors, non-invasive continuous blood pressure monitors, and the detection for flu. So these are a few that you could see where the AI is coming into effect. The AI is being used in many, many different areas. It's amazing what people are coming up with, whether they get this information or what the doctors would like to see, or if the software developers and the entrepreneurs are trying to explain to the doctors what is a better use and a better way to treat their patients or to come up with diagnosis. The Breakthrough Device Program. Now, what is a breakthrough designation? The Breakthrough Device Program, the Breakthrough Device Program is a voluntary program for certain medical devices and device-led combination products that provide for more effective treatment or diagnosis of life-threatening or irreversible debilitating disease or condition. Now, the next slide, please. The FDA has several ways, criteria for determining if you have a breakthrough designation. First criteria, the device provides for more effective treatment or diagnosis of life-threatening or irreversible debilitating human disease or condition. The device also meets at least one of the following in the second criteria: represents breakthrough technology, no approved or cleared alternatives exist, offers significant advantages over existing approved or cleared alternatives, or D, the device availability is in the best interest of the patients. So if you want to state that yours is a breakthrough technology, you should be using these criteria that the FDA has outlined for determining if it's breakthrough technology. Now, what is like I said, the breakthrough technology, supposedly the FDA will work with you in moving this up in their review process. You still have to do all the testing. You still have to have all the proof of the efficacy and the safety of the device. But you could use the terminology. We've worked with many, many companies that like to state that they have breakthrough technologies, and I think it's more for their marketing and for their investment purposes and not for the FDA purposes. So there are three ways that we talked about in getting FDA clearance. Either way, if you have breakthrough technology, you're still going to need FDA clearance. The PMA route is the pre-market approval application. It's the most difficult way of getting a product through. It's normally a brand new device or a brand new technology that there is no substantially equivalent for, and the use of it could represent some safety hazards to the patient or to the medical community that's prescribing or using the technology. This normally is the longest pathway, and it's the most expensive pathway in getting a product through the FDA. Now, the de novo was a middle ground between the FDA 510K process and the PMA. Basically, there was no substantially equivalent, which is what you need for the 510K. There had to be a product that was on the market, classified, and had a 510K. And normally you could show your product to be substantially equivalent to that device. With the de novo, there is no SE, but the device has been relatively shown to be safe for its intended use. So because you don't have to prove the safety of the device, the FDA allows you to go the de novo route. Not as expensive as a PMA, more expensive than the 510K, but it's less expensive, and it's an easier route to get through than the PMA. The 510K is the easiest route for devices, and we try wherever we can is to go the 510K route. It's the cheapest, it's normally the quickest, and you normally have to show some kind of substantially equivalent. Now, if you're saying you have AI, and there was no other AI. Right now, the FDA is looking at any device with AI has to go through de novo. The first device of that kind with AI technology or using AI technology normally has to go through the de novo route at this time. The FDA is putting all AI into de novo. After you get the first de novo, then you'd be able to, the next company would be able to use a 510K using that de novo as substantially equivalent. So the first one out of the market has to go de novo, everybody else copying it, and then you would have to go, you'd be able to do the 510K. Of course, your patents would protect you. The 510K at de novo don't protect you. Unfortunately, if you go a PMA route, everybody after you still has to go through the PMA. The FDA was at one time thinking of taking, after 4 PMAs, to reduce it down to a 510K. The FDA has decided against that, and that was in the original regulations or the original policies, but the FDA has never implemented that. You will see some devices that were PMA or Class 3 that were reclassified down into Class 2. So that does happen periodically. Now, in either case, whether you have a PMA, a de novo, or a 510K, you would need clinical trials. You would have to do bench testing, and you'd have to do clinical testing. So no matter which route you go, the FDA is expecting to see bench testing and clinical trial testing for those types of devices. What is the FDA, but what is it and how is the FDA looking at it? Anytime you have a submission, the first thing that the FDA is looking for in your device is, again, the indications for use of the device. What we find is that many people are going very, very broad on their indications for use. This is a mistake. It's better to almost do a creep. Get your device through the FDA with a narrow focus on your indications for use. Once you have that through the FDA, you could always go back to the FDA and broaden your claims. We find that's the best way for dealing with FDA. What is the learning capabilities and how it could be defined? You have to have an endpoint, and you need to define what you are claiming. So when you're doing studies and when you're trying to approve your device, you need an endpoint. If you're doing a detection of cancer, what are you detecting? What size? What kind of cancer? How is it going to be detected? How is it going to be spotted? We've seen many, many devices over the years, and the finding out that the software becomes more and more sophisticated, and we're finding now that the software is getting a lot better in their detections. But you need an endpoint as part of your indication of use when you're doing your clinical trials. What happens with AI is that it has continued learning. So what you have to do is that you want to come to a point where you have to get your clearance from FDA. It's great for researchers to continue to do, making what they think is a better device or better AI. But that doesn't mean you're going to be able to commercialize it. You got to get to market. Once you're in the marketplace, then you could increase the capabilities of the AI as the AI is learning. Will it change your indications for use? It may, and then you'll have to go back to the FDA. But at least you could start doing research on it and have it out in use, and then seeing how the AI is picking up more information or learning better. As part of your submission, the FDA is going to want to see, does the device need human factor studies? How is the device being used? How it's the clinical use of the device, that will they be able to use it, how it is going to be worked, and they want to make sure that it's going to be able to be used by the medical community. And the last thing that the FDA really keys into is cybersecurity, which we all know is an area of of concern on getting medical data out and controlling that medical data. When you're developing devices for dealing with FDA, we have to make sure that you are following the FDA design control procedures and the quality system regulations. We run into a lot of companies where they're developing a lot and they're not keeping the records the way the FDA is going to be expected for them to keep those records. And then they have to go back and reproduce it. So they have to go backtracking and figuring out what the inputs were and what the outputs were and how it was going to be verified and validated. So you really should implement and making sure that you have in place your design control procedures and follow those procedures as you're developing a device instead of having to go back and reconstruct it. We've seen that a lot. Next thing is the design, the validation. Design validation. Once you have your software, and you got to make sure that you validate the software to make sure that it's going to work clinically. And again, you have to have your indications for use to determine how you're going to validate that design. And then you want to make sure that the software is validated. It's very critical as part of your application that your device software has been validated. And I will go into that a little bit in the next few slides. So you're going to have your clinical trials as part of the software validation. You're going to have your human factor studies. You have to do a risk analysis. And as part of any new medical device company, you have to be in QSR, the quality system regulation compliant. That's 21 CFR 820. 21 CFR 820 is the FDA regulations and the quality system regulations for the manufacturing and design of medical devices. Excuse me. So what is software validation? Software SOPs are needed. You should have procedures for development, a software development process, determining the level of concern of your software, configuration management, developing software requirements. What are the software hazard analysis? How you determine that and put it through a hazard analysis? You have to have anomaly resolution, developing a validation plan, the algorithm validation, unit testing, integration testing, system testing, and then cybersecurity program. You need this if you're involved in AI. You need this as part of your software validation. A lot of this information is going to be submitted in your 510K, your de novo, or your PMA application. This is what the FDA is going to be looking for. A lot of this will be reviewed when the FDA comes and visits your plant and does an inspection of your design control procedures. In a PMA, it's done prior to awarding the PMA approval. As part of the de novo or 510K, the FDA will give you that clearance or that approval prior to doing an inspection. The FDA will come out and do an inspection at some time after you start marketing the device. The next area of concern of FDA in any submission is your human factors study. Human factors studies is an analysis of the errors a user might make in using the software system. It is not intended, it's not related to studies of performance or accuracy. So we must define the user. Who is the user and how it's going to be used. It's going to have to list the characteristics and the qualification for the user. You have to create a use scenario. Brief qualitative stories of phases in the use. Setup, operation, receive analysis, etc. Set of use scenarios should cover entire operations of the system. Should identify the task with each scenario. And enter the patient data, enter the dentist data, etc. List the errors that might that might be made by the user in normal use. Play devil's advocate in each scenario. And add to list possible misuse by user, creating shortcuts or skipping steps.
It looks
address the human factors. You want to conduct a hazard analysis on these errors. You want to mitigate these potential hazards, and the human factor validation will be an observed test following protocols of 15. Well, then you would follow with 15 dentists, FDA required, using the system. Each scenario will have a protocol. The test protocol must include all the identified possible errors that the observer will be looking for those possible errors. Each participant will be interviewed following the test of a scenario by his experience, about his experience. Those possible errors will be touched on. Participants may uncover these errors, and a report should be written. This sounds like a lot of unnecessary work, but the FDA wants to see that you've thought all the possibilities and dealt with them. I can tell you, you want to try to do this internally and do it by yourself. Human factor studies, we have found, is a very, very expensive process. And you really want to figure out how you could do this by getting people in and people that you might know to be able to test the software and make sure it's working properly as far as human factors. The last one is the cybersecurity check. You want to consider ransomware attacks on dentist files through wireless connections. Product is tier 1, FDA criteria, patient harm to multiple patients, and it does not mention direct harm. A cybersecurity hazard analysis is necessary. So the FDA understands that a lot of the patient records and a lot of the information that's in your database, whether it's in the cloud, they want to make sure that what you're doing to making sure you have a cybersecurity so you won't be hacked into that information. The last part is the hazard analysis. This is a critical step for your software. The results lead to new requirements and design changes. You must do a system, human factor, and cybersecurity. These could be combined or separate. All these analyses must follow written SOPs. Hazard analysis is part of your design control. The FDA is expecting that you've done this in order to remove as many hazards, and if they aren't removed, that there are warnings in your instructions for use on what the user or the patient should be doing as part of any potential open hazards. Timeframes. Now, timeframes on getting the product through the FDA, it's very dependent on where you are with the software design. Everybody wants to know how fast we could get these products through the FDA. Where you are on your testing. Do you need clinical testing? Do you need to determine the classification and the pathway? PMA, FDA review could take up to 12 months. De novo, 6 months. And 510K, 5 to 6 months, maybe it's 3 to 5 months. So the pathways and the time are very related to each other. And this should be part of your design plan, especially for your investors, to know the best way and what it's going to take to get things through. I could tell you from experience, working with a lot of startups who have no FDA experience, they all underestimate how much time it's going to take to get to market or get through the FDA. So this should be on your critical path and understanding exactly what is going to be needed to get through the FDA. People ask us when they should hire a regulatory expert. Most of these startups don't have the regulatory expertise. And we tell them the earlier on, the better it is, so we could save a lot of time and put into the critical path a lot of the areas that we just discussed. Other factors on time is the software validation. Has a design history file been set up? The design history file is part of the FDA quality system regulation. It will be your design development documentation, and you would need that when the FDA comes to inspect. Is the quality system in place for the FDA? As I explained, for a PMA, you're going to have a pre-award inspection, and the FDA is going to come out and making sure your quality system is in place. For 510K or de novo, they'll do that inspection after you start marketing your device. For a CE mark, you're going to need the 13485 2016, and that's going to be now under the MDR, Medical Device Regulation for the European Community. For Canada, you will need the MDSAP, which is the Medical Device Single Audit Program. It includes the 13485. It also includes the FDA GMPs and Brazil and Japan. So Canada is the only country at this time that is requiring that you have MDSAP certification in place. All right, are there any questions? I tried to cover a lot in a very short period, and there is a lot there, but I just wanted to give you an overview of what it would take to get your software through the FDA.
Yeah, Alan, we do have one question from Martin Sackler. He's CEO of Ablacor Corporation, and he's asking you, how is the QSub process working currently, and what are the wait times to get a meeting?
Okay, we are really recommending that we set up, or that we prepare a pre-submission. QSub is a pre-submission for whether it's going to be a de novo, a 510K, or even a PMA. Basically, what the pre-sub is outlining what testing we're going to do, what the indications for use of the device is. We give them information on how we're going to run our clinical trials. This, interesting enough, in my history, we used to be able, if you could believe it or not, we used to be able to call up the FDA reviewer. He used to pick up the phone, and he used to talk to you and go over everything that we just discussed. Well, the FDA stopped that, and they went to the pre-sub. So now you have to submit it in writing, which is not that bad because you're going to get back from the FDA in writing what their feelings are, if they have any other questions, or they would like additional studies to be done, and what they're expecting. We're finding a review time on a pre-sub about 45 to 60 days on their response. Now, everybody asks us about a meeting with the FDA on the pre-sub. The FDA, during these meetings, we only recommend a meeting. We find that if you do the pre-sub right, if you describe it properly, you're going to get the proper response. If you start getting responses that the FDA is not understanding the technology, or if there is a problem with the device and the FDA's description, it might be worthwhile getting or setting up a meeting. Normally, we don't recommend a meeting unless there is a problem with the understanding of the information in the pre-sub. So hopefully we get the response back from the FDA. And then if we see that the FDA is having a hard time understanding what we're trying to do, then we recommend the meeting. And it might take 2 to 3 weeks to set up a meeting to get down and go in front of the FDA and describe why we believe what we're doing is necessary, and that the FDA doesn't really understand what our device does. I hope that answers the question.